Hi everyone, welcome to TechDevAdventures. My name is Leonardo, and in this video I'm going to share how I passed the AWS Solutions Architect Professional exam, one of the most difficult tests from AWS. I'm going to talk about how I studied and share some hints that actually might help you getting through it. So if you are planning to take this test, keep watching. Let me start giving you a bit of context. I have some previous experience with AWS, and this year I started taking all of the certifications. First I took the Cloud Practitioner exam, then Developer Associate, after that Solutions Architect Associate, and just recently I got my Solutions Architect Professional badge. So at this point you probably know why this exam is considered the most difficult one from AWS. There are lots of topics and a lot of tools that you need to know in depth. So I'm not going to focus on those. I'm going to instead talk about how I studied, the steps I followed, why they were good for me, and share some hints of things that I realized during this process. The process that I followed is a bit different of what people recommend, but it worked great for me. It was divided in 3 stages, and this is what I'm going to tell you right now. I started phase 1 exactly as I did with the others. I bought a course at Udemy from Stefan Marek, which covers all the parts you need to know about the certification. And at the end, it provides you some sample questions, but it's still not a mock test. In general, I really recommend his courses. He covers all the content you need to know and go through the basics without being boring. Even though for this one specifically, he assumes that you have already previous knowledge or some previous certifications. After that, I watched the videos from the official exam readiness free course from AWS, which does not cover the topics in depth, but gives you a nice idea on how the exam will look like. And finally, I downloaded the sample questions also provided by AWS itself. They give you 10 questions. You can try them and see if you got them right, because the answers are at the end of the PDF file. And because this was everything I did to take the associate certifications, I decided to take the practice exam from AWS to see if I was really prepared for the exam. I really recommend taking this practice exam because the questions are very close to the real one. This exam is also paid, but if you got previous certifications, then you must have a voucher and can do it for free. So what happened? I take this exam, and well, I was not so great. I took only 65%. And as you might know, you need at least 75% to pass this exam. And I was wondering what I missed, but unfortunately, this exam won't give you the answers. So anyways, the date of my exam was already scheduled. I was not feeling prepared. Then I decided to reschedule the exam to 1 more week to have more time to study. Then I started what I call the phase 2, where I decided to use a mock exam. I have to use mock exams in the past, and they are also great. I looked at Udemy and I found the course that everyone recommends from John Bolso is a practice exam. It covers all the topics and it has 4 full exams with 75 questions each. The cool thing about this course is that among the answers, it provides you also links for external resources, as for example AWS white papers or cheat sheets from Tutorials Dojo. So I started go through the first exam, then the second and the third, and I'm always getting from 65 to 70%. And people always recommend you have to at least get 90% on those exams if you want to go well on the real one. And then it was the point that I realized that this exam was much different from the associate levels. And then when I started looking at the answers, I realized that I was missing the things that I really didn't have hands-on experience. As for example, AWS organizations, some networking, and even in-depth DynamoDB usage. Another thing is that the questions will try to trick you in wrong answers simply because you don't have in-depth knowledge. One example is one question about how to connect a mobile application to DynamoDB. The answer that I chose would use a 3-tier application. So the mobile as the front end, connecting to an API gateway, and then a server application connecting to DynamoDB. I thought that this was great and would work. It turned out that the best answer according to the test was connecting the mobile application directly to DynamoDB. Then I thought, well, you should never do this, right? Connecting the front end directly to your database. But in fact, you can do this because you can use cognito credentials to leverage some security in specific rows and columns that you define per user. And I didn't know that. And the practice exams were helping me to learn these kind of new things. But anyways, one more week has passed and I still was not feeling prepared for taking the exam. So then I decided to reschedule the exam for the second time, but this time I pushed the deadline to 1 month ahead instead of 1 week, because I knew that 1 week wouldn't be enough, because I knew I would have to go deeper into those things that I didn't know if I really wanted to pass the certification exam. So then I started phase 3, which was all about reviewing everything I did and going deeper inside the things that I didn't know. So I didn't want to go over the practice tests over and over again because they would be still the same questions and I would end up learning the answers by heart. So instead I created a study document and I was filling this document. I went through the answers and I was filling this document with everything that I didn't know and I thought it was important for the exam. I ended up creating a document that was made of 2 parts. So one, important information about the tools, and another part with some hints of special cases. After reviewing the answers from the 3 practice exams, I ended up with a file of around 40 pages or so. I'm sharing the file with you, but I don't think it's really useful. One, because things that I didn't know and I wrote down maybe are known to you. And second, because there are probably things that I know because of my experience that you didn't have hands-on, you don't know, and they are not on this file. So what I recommend is that you do the same process. Anyways, after I wrote down this file, I said, let me take the last test. And funny thing, I get 70% also in the last exam. It's not because I didn't learn anything, but because the questions, they don't repeat. They are not the same questions from the 3 previous exams. You are always learning new stuff. So, I go over the answers and I add more 10 pages or so to my document. Then at this point, the exam date was getting closer. I couldn't reschedule it anymore because you can do it only 2 times. And then I start wondering what else can I do to see if I am ready to take this exam. So then I search again in Udemy to see if I can get another mock exam. And I was lucky because Stefan had just released at that point his own practice exam. It is also a nice practice exam, but it provides you only with 1 full exam of 75 questions. Then I buy the course and I take the exam, and for my surprise I get only 40%. And I was like, what? Then I go over the answers and I analyze them, and I noticed that I was not really learning anything new. It was pretty much the same context from the other practice exams. But the questions themselves, they were made in a different way. They were very different from the course from John Bonzo. In fact, they were much closer from the ones from the exam. After I took the test, I realized there were 3 or 4 questions. They looked almost the same. They were still different. They were not the same, but they were very similar. Well, after that, my time had run over. I had the test and I couldn't reschedule it anymore, but I was feeling prepared. I didn't have even time to go through my document and review it, but because I wrote those things down, it helped me memorize the things that I didn't have hands-on. Well, in fact, I was not feeling I was prepared for it. I think you'd never believe you are prepared for an exam like that. But well, I went there and I took the exam, passed in the first attempt with 87%. And I was super happy with it. And now I'm going to share 4 hints of things that I learned during this process. So the first hint is that you need to know how to manage your time during the exam. So you have 170 minutes to go over 75 questions. And this will give you around 2 minutes and 15 seconds per question. Now, if you are not a native English speaker, you can request an extension of 30 minutes more, and that will give you around 2 minutes and 40 seconds for every question. And why is it important to do this? Because the questions are all about interpretation. As an example, One question might ask you to select a solution that allows you to block certain things, and one of the answers might indeed block certain things, which is wrong. The solution must allow you to do that, but not really blocking it. Another thing you need to keep in mind is that the questions are big. You spend more or less 1 minute to read and understand the question. So it's useful to know how to identify the important words, but also the context will help you to figure out which solution is the best one. And considering the amount of time that you have per question, I think it's not really useful to flag questions that people recommend to come back later. And I will explain why. When you reach the last question, you are probably running out of time already. And if you want to come back to those questions, you have to spend at least 1 more minute to read it again and more time trying to figure out what you couldn't get correct in the first attempt. And honestly, when I finished my exam, I had only 2.5 minutes remaining. I came back to this one question that I thought I would know. I spent 1 more minute on it and I said, oh, you know what, leave it. Because I was very tired and I wanted to pee. I could have gone to the toilet, but the thing is, the exam wouldn't be paused. So the bottom line here is, if you see you are spending more than 5 minutes on a question, just leave it. Second hint is about getting used to change the focus of the time. So as I mentioned before, the questions are huge, the answer might be huge as well. So the context will help you to pick up the best answer, but in the exam, let's say after 2 minutes and 40 seconds, you need to switch to something completely different. And you are still thinking about the old one. So the problem is that in the real world, this does not happen. You have much more time to think about a project, at least more than 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And even if you are involved with 3-4 multiple projects running at the same time, you still are going to get some kickoff meetings to discuss such things, right? Now, I realize there is only one way of getting used to it. You need to do the practice exams. And they worked great for me, I really recommend. Well, hint number 3 is about rescheduling the exam. There is no shame of rescheduling the exam if you think you are not prepared for it. But one thing I can recommend is that you use at least 1 more month to prepare yourself better. You need to consider that 1 week is not enough and you can do it only 2 times. So as bigger the interval you can put between those dates, as better. If I would have done that, I would have probably get a better rate than 87%. And talking about what I could have done differently, it comes hint number 4, which is about studying the references that are given inside the course and the practice exams. These materials will provide you lots of links to AWS white papers, cheat sheets and other external links that will help you to get more in-depth knowledge on some topics. Yes, it's a lot of content, but it has everything to do with hint number 3, feeling that you are prepared to take this exam. And with this I finish this video. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching. So if you have feedbacks or questions, please leave a comment, give me your like and please share if you like the video. If you are taking the exam, good luck and I hope to see you next time.